Hi, it's Adam here from adaminsights.com. It is currently October 2022 and the Leica M11 was announced and released in January of this year. I was lucky enough to get a hold of one a few days after it was released, and it has been a real privilege to own such a fantastic digital M rangefinder body, and I'm looking forward to many more years of use with that camera. I really love using the Leica M11, just like I loved using the Leica M10 before that, and the MP240 Safari set that I had before that, as well as the standard M240, and the Leica MP film camera body. They're all fantastic. But as soon as the next digital Leica M, or next flagship digital Leica M comes out, and for the purpose of this video, let's call that the Leica M12, I plan on selling my M11 straight away and upgrade it. I guess the practical reason for that is that'll be the best time for me to sell or trade in my M11, because that's when it'll have the most value on the second-hand market before that value drops off. So I'll have a lot more money then to put towards upgrading towards the M12. But for this video, I want to talk about features that I really love in the Leica M11 that I want to see carried over to the Leica M12, and I also want to speculate on what we might see in the Leica M12 as well, and provide a bit of a wish list on what I hope Leica can put into the M12. I hope that they're watching this, and I hope that they can listen to some of these ideas. Please leave a comment below, let me know what you would like to see in the Leica M12 as well. You'll notice I don't actually have a camera in my hands to show off in this video. That's because I want to make a really important point early on. It's the gear that we use is just simply not important. The fact is that what is important in photography is the emotional impact that our photographs take. Do they have an emotional impact? Do they make people happy? Do they make people think? Are our photographs going to be works of art that people enjoy, or are our photographs just going to bring back happy memories? That's what matters in photography, not the gear or the camera bodies or the lenses or anything else that we're using. It's always the emotional impact of the image that matters most. So that's why in this video, instead of actually just showing you the camera, I'm going to be showing you some images that I've taken over the years with all of my Leicas and some other cameras as well, just to enjoy while we're talking over this point. Now sure, as we are only in October 2022, it's safe to say that the Leica M12 is going to be several years away. Normally, Leica seems to update the digital M bodies once every 3 to 4 years. So I'm speculating that we're going to see the M12 get released around January 2026. Obviously between now and then we're going to see things like a Leica M11 monochrome. We'll probably see the Leica Q3 come out as well with a higher resolution sensor. We will likely see a M11P and maybe even a high resolution version of the M11 as well, like we did with the Leica M10R. I think it's fair to say that when the Leica M12 comes out, Leica is going to make a massive innovation in photography. They always do. It tends to be subtle, but also pretty mega at the same time. Leica has probably a history of more innovations in photography than any other camera manufacturer out there. Like a century ago, they invented the 35mm portable camera. So they defined the 35mm frame to go into cameras that's been used ever since, with both film cameras and a lot more recently with digital full-frame cameras. So everyone out there shooting their full-frame mirrorless or full-frame DSLR, with all that full-frameness that you get off on, you've got Leica to thank for that 35mm frame. And here's another little interesting point. Why did we only ever have a maximum of 36 frames in a roll of 35mm film? Well, I don't know how true this is, but rumour goes that the original engineer behind the Leica portable cameras, Oscar Barnack, could only stretch his arms out so far, and that was about as long as a roll of film with 36 frames on was. So apparently that's the why. I don't know how true that is. I've heard some people say no, it's not true. Some people absolutely swear by it. So if you've got any more information on that point, please leave a comment. I'd love to read what you had to say about that. Let's talk about another massive innovation that Leica has made. Who developed the very first interchangeable mirrorless camera? Well, way back in the 1920s, that was Leica. And they've kept that going ever since. And who developed the very first digital mirrorless interchangeable camera? Now, a lot of people are going to say, oh, well, that was Panasonic in 2008 with the, what was it again? The DMCG1. Now, the DMCG1 was an innovative camera by Panasonic and was touted as being the very first mirrorless camera with interchangeable lenses with its 4/3 sensor in 2008. Sorry, Panasonic. Leica released the M8 back in 2006, which was an APS-C camera which was mirrorless and had interchangeable lenses. So Leica actually beat Panasonic by 2 years on that front. And who released the very first interchangeable full frame camera? So the first camera with interchangeable lenses that was also full frame. Who released that? I'll give you a hint. It wasn't Sony in 2013 with the A7. It was actually Leica with the M9 in 2009. So Leica actually beat Sony in that race by 4 years. So as much as people would like to say that it was the first full-frame interchangeable camera was Sony's big innovation with the A7, sorry guys, that trophy actually belongs to Leica with the M9. But obviously Sony, Panasonic, they've got some massive budgets, they can say some of these things, but yeah, facts are facts. Leica released these massive innovations first before those other manufacturers just rode on Leica's coattails. So I think it's safe to say that when we're talking about camera technology, Leica is actually the leader in the definitive innovations, and the other manufacturers just come along for the ride. Leica has really set the scene for what photography is. And they did that like a century ago, and they're going to continue to do that going forwards as well. So what really could the Leica M12 offer? So, you know, the first big one for me is thinking about the actual viewfinder and the rangefinder of the Leica M series itself. And I was wondering, could that in any way be innovated on? And I'd heard some speculation, I'd seen some speculation online that initially I dismissed, but the more I actually thought about it, the more I thought, this could actually be a really good idea. What about a hybrid rangefinder viewfinder and EVF all in one? Stay with me here. Fuji did originally come up with something kind of like that with the X Pro series some years ago. Now, for me, I really love using the rangefinder viewfinder in the Leica M. I get on really well with the rangefinder focusing system. I enjoy using the focusing patch, and the thing is now with muscle memory, I just know where to set the lens, and based on my aperture, what's going to be in focus when I'm taking the shot. So I actually really like using the Leica M's rangefinder viewfinder. It's bright, it's clear, and I can see what's coming in and out of the frame. I very rarely use the live view, and when I do use the live view, it's just so I can get an idea on what my exposure might be if I'm doing something a bit interesting with the light, but then I always flick back to the main rangefinder to focus and to frame up finally. So what I'm wondering, could Leica bring in some sort of hybrid rangefinder and EVF viewfinder into the M12? So you could just flick a switch or push a button and suddenly you've got that EVF through your rangefinder viewfinder, so you can get an idea on what your exposure is doing. That would be a really attractive feature for me, because I don't really like using the screen on the back for live view, because external lighting conditions can affect what I'm seeing on that screen. And I'm really not that interested in buying a VisoFlex EVF, because I just don't want that thing on the top of my camera, and I just wouldn't use it enough to justify buying it. So that's why I'm hoping that the Leica M12 could potentially have some sort of a hybrid EVF and rangefinder viewfinder. It could actually be a really useful and innovative feature, because it would give us the best of both worlds. Because let's face it, when mirrorless DSLRs really started to pick up speed and were taking up space on camera store shelves, one of the biggest objections against them was their EVF viewfinders, which were never great. And even today, I actually still don't get on very well with an EVF viewfinder in a stills camera. It just never works for me. So I always prefer mirrored DSLRs where I'm looking straight through the lens, or the rangefinder viewfinder. With the Leica M12, Leica, please, please, please give us inbuilt sensor cleaning. Now, I know that they want to keep the size of the body down, and that's fair enough. And I will also point out that cleaning a Leica M sensor is actually quite an easy process to do. I've done it plenty of times before with sensor swabs, and I don't have an issue with it. It's easy to do, but I definitely don't like doing it, because it's always in the back of my mind I could be about to make a very, very costly mistake. Because let's face it, I couldn't afford to buy a Leica body sort of twice just pay for a sensor replacement. That could be really expensive. So I want to really get away from having to manually clean my sensor. Now, in fairness, I think that the dust sealing on the Leica M11 is much better than it was on the M10 or the M240. And that's, well, I've been using the M11 probably more than I ever used the M10 or the M240. I swap my lenses around all the time, so the chances of getting dust into the camera are high. But even on the M10, even if I just left a lens on there for months and months and never bothered to change the lens, it would still seem to build up extra dust on the sensor, and I'd have to clean it every couple of months. The Leica M11 I've owned since January, and we're now in the first couple of weeks of October, and I actually haven't had to wet clean that sensor once. It's been excellent. So whatever dust sealing and anti-static technology is in the M11's body is great. Now, don't get me wrong, there are a couple of specks of dust that have shown up, but not enough to make me want to go and clean it yet. So maybe whatever dust sealing and anti-static technology is in the M11 could be carried over to the M12, and they could give us a vibrating sensor for built-in sensor cleaning in the M12. Then I'd never have to worry about cleaning the sensor again. That could be really fantastic, and I hope that Leica gives us built-in sensor cleaning in the M12. Will the Leica M12 have IBIS, in-body image stabilisation, with the sensor? For me, I personally hope not, or if it does, I actually wouldn't use it. That's because I'm really just a photography purist. I don't really like the idea of stabilizers. Every time I've ever used it on a stills camera before, I've always felt that whether it's in the lens stabilization or in body stabilization, digital stabilization, whatever technology it is, I've always felt that an image stabilizer is trading off clarity for stability. That's my personal perception. But the other thing is that being a purist when it comes to taking photos, I just don't want that technology in the camera to assist me. So I personally wouldn't use IBIS, but I think it is fair to say that Leica will consider it for the M12. There could be a few technical challenges, because when you think about it, with an IBIS with an IBIS sensor, where the sensor is actually on an axis and is moving around a little bit, that might not work very well with like the third-party rangefinder focusing system. On other cameras with an autofocus system, or where you're looking for an EBF to check your focusing system is working from the sensor. With a rangefinder, your focusing system is a secondary piece of equipment built into the camera that's not related to the film or sensor. So that would be something that Leica may have to try and solve. How would an IBIS image stabilization system, which is moving the sensor around, work with a rangefinder focusing system, so that photographers can still be certain they're going to get pin-sharp images? However, there is a really interesting quote that I've got here from Stephen Schultz of Leica that he made with an interview with Thorsten Overgaard a few years ago. On in-body image stabilization, it's really obvious that it's a question of body size. Yeah, I can understand that. Leica wants to keep the bodies of the M nice and small. Leica, well, he says we, as in Leica, have a priority on the body size, which has a great heritage, particularly for the Leica M, and having image stabilization needs some space in the body to move the sensor. We cannot talk about future products in our strategy, but you can be sure that we will have a close look at in-body image stabilization. We think if it is helpful for our customers, we may one day do it. So Leica has not ruled out the possibility of IBIS entering the Leica M lineup. Now, as I say, if IBIS comes to a Leica M, I wouldn't use it, but I can see the benefits for some people who may want to use it. It's fair to say you wouldn't see image stabilization in any of the M's lenses, ever. That's just based on the technology of the Leica M lenses. And if you are a real Leica man, or woman, sorry, if you're a Leica person, let me make that clear, you have probably bought some of their very fast glass, where you can use fast shutter speeds, and so maybe image stabilization just isn't a priority for you either. I honestly hope that Leica carries over the USB-C connection from the M11 into the M12. It's been a great tool for downloading images, recharging the camera. I'm very happy with the USB-C connection in the M11 because it also actually gives you a second charger for the camera as well, and that's been really useful for me. Particularly on one occasion when I forgot my charger, I was able to charge the camera through USB-C. And it means that, say, if you're going away on a holiday and you find that your external charger isn't working or you've lost it, you can still charge that camera with USB-C with something that is as simple as a laptop or a phone charger. It's brilliant technology. Thank you, Leica. I want to see it happen on the M12. It's fair to say that the Leica M12's body will be even more minimalist than the M11. maybe even skinnier as well. That would actually be quite nice. It could almost get right down to that form factor of the MP, which is fantastic to use. I actually agree with some comments that Eric Kim made on his blog, that the FN button to the left of the screen on the M11 can go, and Leica can probably just stick with 2 buttons on the left of the screen, because I think that the functionality of the FN button can be merged with the set button on the arrow pad to the right hand side of the screen. The FN button I actually do find confusing, and because its functionality is kind of remapping some of the functions from the set button in the arrow pad from the M10, I actually find it confusing, and I'm still, with muscle memory, pressing the set button in the arrow pad like I would have been on the M10 with the M11, and I'm getting confused. So I don't think the function button needs to be there anymore. However, that said, I disagree with Eric Kim about removing the frameline lever on the front of the camera. Leica did try and do that with the M240, and there was some backlash against it. I personally use the frameline lever on my cameras quite a lot, because when I'm out, I've generally got my 28, my 35 and my 50mm lens, sometimes my 90, and I actually use the frameline lever just to see, or just to get an idea on what my alternative framing could be, and I swap my lenses around. So it's certainly something that I use, and it's something that I'm aware of Leica users are using as well. But I do know there are some people in the camp of, hey, I never use the frameline lever, so they may well be saying they don't want it there. Fair enough. Maybe Leica would go down the path again of releasing an M12 without a frameline lever, and then an M12P with a frameline lever, but given the pushback that they received about doing that with the M240, I don't think they'll do it, because the frameline lever is on the M10 by standard, and it's on the M11 by standard as well. Let's talk about ISOs with the Leica M12. Something I think is fantastic with the Leica M11 is the base ISO of 64. The tonal range of 64 is beautiful. I try and shoot at ISO 64 as often as I possibly can, because I love putting on my f1.4 lenses on a bright sunny day, fast shutter speed, and just taking some lovely images with a very low ISO. The images are lovely and clean, the tonal range is wonderful, the colour's great, and they're just so editable as DMG files later on. So I hope that the M12 has a base ISO of 64, or maybe you could even go a little bit lower to 32. Could you do it, Leica? As far as the upper end of ISOs go, I've got no doubt it will exceed what we currently have with the M11. I will say with the M11 past, say, 20,000 ISO, I don't really see much usability in the images. Still, I very rarely go past 6400 ISO on any cameras. With the M11, certainly 6400 ISO is quite usable. Do I see the need to go even further? Probably not. But that's also because I've got some very nice fast glass, and if I'm out taking shots at night, I do tend to have a tripod with me, and I like doing some long exposures. And 64 ISO with my f1.4 lenses is generally good enough for handheld low light and handheld street photography. So for me, I don't really care about the upper end of the ISOs of the camera, but I've got no doubt that just to keep up with the progress of technology, Leica is going to maybe get us closer to the 500,000 or 1 million ISO mark with the M12. Will we see video recording in the Leica M12? Well, the M12 will no doubt have the sensor and CPU technology to be able to record 4K and 8K video. No doubt it will. No doubt the M11 has that capability as well. But I don't think we'll see it, because Leica M cameras are all about the pure photography. Yeah, they're all about pure photography. We saw video recording with the M240 and then Leica took it away because Leica M cameras are all about being a purist photographer. Let's talk about the screen interface. I think it's fair to say that the M12 will have a touchscreen, just like the M11. I think that the interface on the M11, when it can certainly be improved. There's a few parts that are a little bit too small to be usable as a touchscreen. Scrolling on it isn't very intuitive. It's not a great implementation of a touchscreen, to be frank, in the M11. Bits are too small, scrolling's difficult. I still use it really with the arrow pad. And even reviewing pictures and trying to flick through, it's slow. So I hope that Leica can do a better job with the touchscreen in the M12 than they have with the M11. Obviously we're going to see the usual things like Wi-Fi in the M12 as well, which are useful features with the camera, I will give it that. Something else though, something which I really like about the M11 is the fact that it's got an internal 64 gig storage and I can sync that with my SD card. So if I take a shot, I've got one copy on the internal memory of the camera and one copy going to the SD card. That's also great as well if you head out and you've forgotten your SD card, you can just use the internal memory. But I would really like to see the M12 have obviously more internal memory because, let's face it, with the way technology is going, one day 64 gig is going to be quite small and insignificant. So I would like to see Leica expand on the internal memory with the M12, but also offer us dual SD card slots in the M12 as well. That's going to be really, really important because I do generally have a need to take shots and have one copy myself on an SD card and then take a card out and hand that card to someone else. I want the ability to be able to shoot RAWs to one SD card and put the JPEGs on another card so I can hand the JPEGs off to get them printed on an ad hoc basis. Or I want the ability to know that I've got two cards backing each other up in my camera. I really want to have the dual card shooting capability that we've seen on dual card cameras for years and years in the Leica M. I hope that as the size of other components of the camera can shrink, that the SD card slots that we will be able to have dual SD card slots in the M12. Maybe one way to achieve what we're looking for here could be that the M12 has to have micro SD cards as opposed to standard SD cards. That I wouldn't be averse to because the reliability of micro SD cards has certainly got better and better and better, and their availability and their price has also pretty much become on par with normal SD cards as well. So maybe micro SD cards are going to be the way of the future in the Leica M series for achieving dual card slots. I wouldn't be averse to that. Now let's talk about sensor resolution for the M12. How many megapixels will the M12 have? Let's speculate on this. This is the big elephant in the room. So on the one hand, I actually think that it could be 60 megapixels like the M11. And the only reason I'm thinking that is because, hey, the M240 was a 24 megapixel camera and the M10 was a 24 megapixel camera. The M10 definitely offered big sensor improvements on the M240 with better low light capabilities, better dynamic range, better colour, and better high ISO performance. So I'm not saying that the M12 could have the same sensor as the M11. The M11 does have a fantastic sensor, but the fact is over the next few years we're going to see some big leaps forward in sensor technology like we always do, so Leica will bring them into the M12 sensor, no doubt. But I guess, could the sensor resolution stay the same as the M11? I guess we'll see, and we'll probably know close to the time, depending on what the other manufacturers are doing. I guess if Canon, Nikon and Sony are going way past 100 megapixels, Leica will probably see the need to go up to 100 megapixels or more as well. But one of the best things I really like about the M11 is the ability to shoot at different resolutions and get different amounts of dynamic range in the image. And I think that technology will probably be carried over to the M12 from the M11 because it has been extremely well received, and it is an excellent feature. And for photographers who really know their craft and like shooting low light or studio work, sometimes they know when they can just drop that resolution a little bit to really push that dynamic range to get a even more stunning shot. So I think it's actually a great feature. It's a very much photographers centric feature as opposed to a tech heads centric feature that Leica has developed, and I think they're going to carry that over to the M12. Now, if Leica does increase the resolution of the M12's sensor past 60 megapixels, the argument, will it out-resolve the clarity of the current lineup of Leica lenses, is moot. Really, because Leica lenses are so good anyway. Leica has also been developing new APO lenses like the 35 and the 50mm Summicron Apo lenses, which are razor sharp, and also the new 35mm Summilux that was released a couple of months ago. They are the lenses of the future that are designed for the sensors of today and well into the future as well. But there was a really good quote here from Peter Carver, again in an interview with Forsten Overgaard, where Peter Carver, like a lens designer, said, "We got rid of the worry of such things, the higher resolution and all. The new lenses are prepared to work with higher resolution." And so that gives me confidence that my current 28mm Summilux, my current 35mm Summilux and my current 50mm Summilux are going to be fine on the improved resolutions of Leica sensors well into the future. But I guess I'll wrap up here by just reading out this other quote from Peter Carver as well. Of course, if you are doing pixel clipping and such, it's like looking at the thickness of the paint. But look at the picture. Look at the picture. That is the most important point to remember here. The picture is the most important part of photography. Not the camera, not the camera's sensor, not the camera's capabilities, not the photo editing software, not the lens, not the quality of the print, nothing like that. It is the picture that is the most important part of photography. The picture that brings back happy memories. The picture that documents an important moment that the world needs to see. One of my favourite, well, I say favourite, but what I think is one of the most important pictures of pretty much the 20th century and of all time is actually the photograph Napalm Girl, which single-handedly helped turn the public perception of the Vietnam War. It's an absolutely terrible picture, and it's also an extremely powerful picture as well at the same time. And it was shot on grainy black and white Kodak, I believe ISO 400 film. It wasn't developed very well, so it's not exactly a very clear picture, but it's a very powerful picture. It's the emotional impact of the picture that counts. So it's really, how does the picture make you feel? Does it bring back a happy family memory? Is it a important historical moment? Is it a picture that is a work of art? Is it a picture that is making people think? That's what really counts in photography. Not the gear, but I'm the first to admit, it's always fun to speculate about the gear and to talk about the gear. But please, leave me a comment below. Would love to know what you think about the M12. I've got some more thoughts about all of this over on my blog. Let's get a conversation happening. I hope that Leica has heard what I would like to see in the M12 and could at the very least consider them. Yeah, and I'd love to know what everyone else thinks as well. And I hope you've been enjoying my images too. Thanks guys.